Hello everyone, and welcome back to another solo spooky story. My name is Rob, and I'll be your host. For those of you who don't know, the solo spooky stories are shorter episodes every other week told by myself, where I just talk about something that I found pretty interesting, or we've had something submitted to us by a listener, or something else in between. But yeah, they're shorter episodes. It's just a one-on-one thing. There's no conversation. And yeah, they're pretty fun. As I said before, I really enjoy doing these. I sound like a broken record at this time, I think, where I think I say this in every single episode. But yeah, they're fun to do. And I'll keep doing them for as long as people like them. But yeah, with that said, I hope you're having a lovely day whenever it is you're listening to this. I think most people seem to listen to these episodes in the morning for some reason. I'd love to hear if you listen to them at a different point or when you kind of schedule them. We've kind of had a few people saying to us that they like listening to us when they're working out, which is just bizarre to me. So fair play if that's one of the things that you do. That's that's a bit, I don't understand it, but that's good. And yeah, other people say that they use it when they go running. A few others have said that they like to listen when they're just sitting in the car. And yeah, I usually listen to podcasts when I'm just sitting down having a cup of coffee or something, or just on in the background basically throughout the day. But if there's one that I want to focus on in particular, it's when I'm kind of sitting down to put aside time for it, usually in the morning as well. So yeah, I'd love to hear from some of you what your podcast listening habits are and how you find is the best time to enjoy us, or best activity to enjoy listening to us. But yeah, with that said, we are going to get into it today. We are talking about a pretty famous UFO case, actually, from the 1950s, which is fun. And it's also from Italy, which I don't think we've actually had a UFO case in Italy that we've just talked about before. So this is a new one for us. So yeah, we're just going to get into it. So today we are in Florence, as I said, in Italy, on the 27th of October, 1954. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, from what I can understand, and we are in the Stadio Artemio Franchi. Not sure how to pronounce that. My Italian pronunciation's not great. There was approximately 10,000 spectators in this stadium, and they were gathered for a friendly match between Fiorentina and Pistoia. Again, I could be completely wrong with the pronunciation there, but we're going to go with that. The match had just started. The whistle was blown, and the ball was kicked by whichever team kicked the ball to start the game. And at this point, everything stopped. The players froze mid-stride. The referee seemed to lower his whistle, and 10,000 heads in the stadium turned upwards to look at the sky. And above the stadium, suspended in the sky, are objects that could not be explained. These were silent, they were metallic, and they seemed to be moving with some sort of purpose, that there was some control behind them. After a few moments of just stunned silence, a strange, shimmering substance began to fall from the sky itself, and it began to drift down, and some people said that it looked almost like snow. It started to drift down towards the stadium, and as it got down towards the people on the ground, it appeared to be these silvery threads that seemed to dissolve at touch. Some people eventually called it angel hair, and others called it evidence. But I suppose on that day in the heart of Florence, one thing was absolutely certain. Someone finally said something that could make the Italians stop playing football, which in itself is a paranormal thing that no one will ever be able to explain in future. So today, as I said, we're talking about this just mad sighting in Florence, and something that I think it's pretty well known, this case, but for some reason, when you look at kind of like the top 10 UFO sightings in history, it's not really in those for some reason. I don't know why, because this is a mass sighting, and it should be talked about more. So it's I suppose maybe because it's in Europe, European sightings are generally talked about maybe a little bit less. I don't know, but we are where we are with this. But I suppose the setting that we're in Florence is, as I said, in 1954, we're in post-war Florence, and this city is really rebuilding itself. Throughout history, Florence has always been this culturally vibrant and, I suppose, exciting city to be in. You know, it's the birth of the Renaissance, and it's an incredibly important city. And post-war Europe is no different. The city is vibrant again, the culture is strong in it. People seem to be optimistic about the future. And most importantly, Florence is deeply connected to football. matches, I saw this cool quote online actually saying that matches weren't just sporting events, they were civic rituals, which I absolutely love. And yeah, the 27th of October 1954 was no different. Fiorentina, the local team, was playing, and they took to the pitch in front of a crowd of around 10,000 people. It was a pretty normal afternoon up to this point, and, you know, for all intents and purposes, nothing was wrong until something was wrong. I think the good thing about this site, though, is that it wasn't a lone witness in a remote field. This was a mass sighting in broad daylight, and that's something that we need to remember as we talk about this further. So, early in the second half, as I said, just as the game was starting again, players and spectators noticed something unusual in the sky. Witnesses described what looked like egg-shaped or cigar-like objects moving slowly and deliberately in the sky. Fiorentina defender Ardico Mangini recalled that it looked like an egg. It was moving slowly. Another player called Romolo Tucci said, "We saw them directly for real." And fans described multiple objects moving in formation, almost as if they were dancing above the stadium. And as I said, the match stopped, the crowd fell completely silent, and for several minutes, all eyes were fixed on the sky. At which point, I talked about this angel hair began to fall. So, witnesses described this material that fell from the sky in this weird kind of manner. And it was this silvery, fibrous, and apparently quite delicate, like hair-like object, basically, that fell. Some people said that it kind of looked like cotton or fine strands of glass, which is a wildly different description. Cotton and fine strands of glass are two very different things. But I get what they're trying to say is that it was delicate, effectively. And allegedly at this point, some children in the stadium tried to gather it, only for it to dissolve in their hands. So I can picture this almost like snow happening, where kids, being kids, naturally just try to, you know, gather snow up in their hands, and in this case it's what became known as angel hair. You know, it's a natural phenomenon, or it's a natural reaction, not a phenomenon. There's nothing natural about this phenomenon, but I suppose I can understand where it's coming from. And look, adults will be the same. I've no doubt that I would probably try to do this. Maybe in hindsight, actually, now after saying that, I'd probably be a bit cautious that maybe you should not be touching this unknown substance that's fallen from the sky. But, you know, who are we to know? And so as I kind of dug into this further, this phenomenon of angel hair, this actually wasn't the first time that this was reported in connection with UFO sightings. And I suppose what's important, though, is that the Florence event is actually probably one of the most dramatic in the angel hair phenomena, if that's what we want to call it. I don't want to give too many other examples, because I actually want to talk about this in future on a full episode at Sue's. But yeah, I suppose the difference with the Florence sighting is that it's such a mass sighting that it's just something just so different. Like, we're in a completely different realm here. Like, this is it's what I said earlier, you know, it's not like it's this single person just standing in a field seeing something and reporting it the next day. This is 10,000 people in a stadium in broad daylight reporting this. And I can only imagine how it must have felt with this substance falling from these supposed unknown crafts as well. Like, I'd say there's a sense of wonder that comes with this, but I'd imagine it's followed quite closely by a sense of dread. Like, people absolutely would not have known what this was. And I think it would be absolutely fair if they started to panic a little bit that they don't know if they're being attacked. While we are in post-war Europe, you know, and things are starting to look a little bit optimistic, the Cold War is very much so, you know, the early days of it are very much so underway. And there would generally be, I think, a fear and a skepticism of what could potentially be coming from other countries. Is that there's potentially another attack? Let's also not forget that this is post-war Europe. Most people in this stadium, I would assume, have a very vivid memory of the Second World War, and it wouldn't put it past them for them to maybe be having some sort of feelings that there might be an attack coming, and it certainly wouldn't be the first time that they would have experienced something like this, like the fear that comes from an attack or something like that. So I'd say it was a very tense environment once the initial shock and awe of the experience occurred. So yeah, so as I said, this angel hair fell from these crafts, and even though it did dissolve, some people allegedly managed to collect samples. I am not 100% certain how they managed to collect it if it dissolves in your hands, but they obviously did. I don't know if it was a case that they managed to collect it in bottles or something like that. I'm completely speculating here. I couldn't actually find an answer as to how they collected it. All I know is that they did collect it. And yeah, the samples were collected and were eventually taken to the University of Florence for analysis. But before we get to that, the craft hung in the air for some time. They did this kind of dancing formation, is what some said, that they were kind of moving around completely silently. They were shiny metallic objects. I think the kind of classic either egg shape, cigar shape, or the kind of flying saucer motif is kind of here. That it's kind of something of the 50s of its time, and even into the 60s, where UFOs seem to be just these like shiny metallic objects. They kind of change color as time progresses and technology changes, but you know, you can read into that however you want to. But in the 50s and 60s, they're very much so these kind of shiny steel looking or aluminium looking objects. And yeah, they stayed there for a time before they just disappeared. They flew off. So the samples that were collected, as I said, they were brought to the University of Florence for analysis. And the material reportedly contained boron, silicon, calcium, and magnesium. And that was an interesting, I suppose, occurrence or evidence, I suppose, because these are all natural materials that are found in abundance on Earth, I would assume. And it kind of, I suppose, while people could see that they were a natural substance, the fact that it evaporated quite quickly upon being touched, it kind of made deeper analysis of the item impossible, because as soon as people were to prod it, I believe, it kind of like disintegrated a bit. And if this was some sort of natural phenomenon, it was one that fooled like basically 10,000 people. And it left behind a material that science struggled at the time to explain, and I can't actually see if it offers an explanation now. So one of the explanations is that this angel hair might be spider silk, which is a wild thought that there was enough spider silk generated in the sky that 10,000 people were kind of coated in it in a stadium. But it's not wildly far-fetched. If you look up images of spider silk, it does actually travel in the wind. And from what I understand, in this area of Italy, it's not unheard of. Now, I don't know if it's unheard of at that scale. I couldn't find anything kind of confirming that. But in smaller scales, it is possible, and it's not unheard of, as I said, in this area. So I guess it's believable that there could be some freak occurrence where a large amount of spider silk was gathered up in the wind and potentially deposited here. I guess it's entirely possible. I can't really think of any other way that it could happen, but yeah, allegedly this could have happened, and it's kind of one of the most prominent theories as to what this angel hair was. Now, we're taking the angel hair as spider silk and completely ignoring the fact that there were multiple crafts seen in the air at this time. That's a completely different set of events. So, you know, if we take them separately, it's easy to prove, but then if you take them together, it kind of dismantles the theory around it. The other thing as well is that the composition of the material, the boron, silicon, calcium, and magnesium, this composition isn't actually consistent with spider silk. So it kind of, again, challenges that explanation. But I think it probably is the most believable natural explanation out there, if you want to look into it further. So yeah, so the sightings all kind of just ended there. Like, there was no real kind of reemergences of sightings again. It didn't happen again in the same area. There was kind of a very, very grainy picture that was taken and nothing else. So it's, I suppose, this unique mass sighting where no pictures were taken, and yeah, it's bizarre. I suppose it's the early 50s in Europe. I wouldn't imagine most people would have cameras at this point. I doubt they were in any way taking pictures of football matches either. Like, they wouldn't have been televising them at this point, I would assume. So it's unlikely that there would have been professional cameras there looking at the football either. So I guess it's believable that the people didn't go out with their cameras to this football match. They were just going to watch the match. So I guess I can understand that. But the grainy picture that is there does appear to show some sort of flying saucer. Now, there's been numerous drawings about it. There was newspaper articles. Like, there was a media frenzy that came from this. So there's plenty of witness statements, drawings, diagrams, all sorts of things. So that is all there. But first-hand sort of evidence, like photographic evidence, there's one grainy photo that I could find, and I couldn't find anything else. So just to, I suppose, conclude then, some theories that are out there. Theory number one is that, and it's the most obvious theory, is that this is some sort of extraterrestrial craft. The people, the witnesses at the time, they pointed to the scale of the sighting being, an important aspect to this, that 10,000 people all saw this and they generally corroborated one another. There was coordinated movement, allegedly, that dancing that I talked about in the sky that didn't seem to make much sense. That's something that you actually see a lot in UFO sightings right up till now, even, is that when people report seeing mass UFOs, that they seem to kind of almost be like playful in their nature with one another. They fly around each other in patterns. There's that kind of dancing talked about as well. So this is actually consistent with early and current UFO sightings. Obviously, the elephant in the room is the angel hair that fell from the sky, basically, which we don't have an explanation for. And the duration of the event actually is another important factor in all of this. This went on for several minutes. This wasn't just a sighting, a brief moment, and then they were gone. Like this occurred for several minutes. Like people saw with detail these objects in the sky. So it would be difficult to misinterpret them as something else when there's so many people looking at them for such a prolonged period of time. And I suppose the weakness in this theory, though, overall, is that when people did investigate it, particularly the military, the Air Force, nearby airports, there seems to be a total lack of radar confirmation with all of this, which doesn't, I suppose, help people talking about something being in the sky for this long. Now, I know other people would say that UFOs don't necessarily have to appear on radar, and I absolutely agree with that, but it is something that people do point to, is that there is literally no evidence for this except for the small samples of angel hair that were collected. The second theory, which I absolutely adore, is that spiders were migrating in the area, taking part in something that's called ballooning, and basically says that spider silk can drift in sunlight and appear shiny, and that these ballooning events can be actually quite large. And this is literally a case of migrating spiders traveling in the air, like on the wind. So we're talking like thousands upon thousands of spiders somehow being caught up in the wind and traveling to migrate. It's not unheard of. Like it is possible and it does occur in this area, but we're talking like apocalyptic levels of spiders traveling, which is actually to me more terrifying than a UFO appearing in the sky. But again, people have pointed to that spider silk, it does drift in sunlight and it does appear metallic when the sun hits it. And these ballooning events can actually be quite large, which could lead some people to misinterpret the metallic craft as spiders, basically, that the webs being caught up. And I did see some people talking about how with the kind of the heat coming off the people in the stadium, it could cause some sort of like updraft, like just kind of the heat radiating off 10,000 people in the stadium, that it could almost cause these spider webs to get like caught up in some sort of draft, and that they would kind of spin around one another, and it could give off the appearance that they were dancing in the sky, as people said. Now, the weaknesses with this statement, or I suppose this theory, is that the chemical analysis that was done, it didn't match biological silk in any way from what I can see. Witnesses did describe structured metallic craft. Like, I understand that people can be confused and see things differently, but they did describe like clear metallic craft that they could very clearly see was like constructed craft. So there's that. And then I suppose just the mass scale of the amount of spiders that would be required for this. I said already that's a more terrifying thought to me than the aircraft. The next theory that we have then is some Cold War military activity. I talked about this already, like we're in the early days of the Cold War. So there could have potentially been some sort of experimental craft that was there. Now, there is no military records about this. I suppose whatever could have potentially fallen off crafts like this, it doesn't dissolve by being touched, or not that we know of anyway. And the objects, crucially, were silent. So again, there's no craft that we know of then or now that would be able to do this. And then I suppose the last two theories that we have is an atmospheric phenomena. And this, I actually love this. So this idea centers around, I suppose, rare temperature inversions or ice crystals being formed in the atmosphere. And the sun basically reflecting off these ice crystals, making them appear like these giant metallic objects. And that, yeah, that's what was seen this day, and that it was kind of falling ice crystals that were reflecting off the sun as they fell. And that's what people potentially could have interpreted as the angel hair. Now, I will say the angel hair was collected and tested, so it's kind of a weak argument at that. But I suppose if we wanted to go down the believability route, we could say that maybe there were some ice crystals caught in the air that kind of confused people, and people saw them, along with the spider silk getting caught in the wind and then falling on people. It's probably more believable a theory than a UFO craft just sitting above a football match. But yeah, when you kind of challenge both of them as separate events that occurred, it doesn't exactly hold up to scrutiny that much. And then I suppose the final one, or the final theory that's out there, is mass misperception. And some psychologists have argued that large crowds can influence each other, and we've seen this before, like mass hysteria and such like that. It does occur. However, multiple independent witnesses did all verify this. Physical material from the event was collected, and as I said before, the event lasted for quite some time. I think it was actually around 15 minutes. So, like, there's a lot of time for this to occur. So it doesn't hold up as well, I suppose. But it is an interesting theory. So yeah, to conclude, I suppose, the Florence football incident, or UFO football incident, it's kind of in this weird place because it was too well witnessed to dismiss it, but it's too ambiguous to resolve. There's no photographic evidence, as I said. There's that one grainy picture, but that's it. The angel hair that was captured and kept, it dissolves upon touch. It doesn't seem to be a naturally occurring item, but, you know, it's a strange one anyway. Like, we can't ignore the fact that 10,000 people looked up and saw something that made them forget that there was a football match occurring right in front of them. It's something that made professional athletes freeze, and something that left behind a substance that science still can't fully explain. So it could very well have been a mixture of rare natural events. It potentially could have been classified Cold War technology that we still don't know about. Or maybe it was exactly what it looked like. Maybe it was a UFO that flew over this football stadium and dumped something on the crowd, whatever it was, and we just don't know. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. Like, I'd love to hear if you think that mass sightings, do they actually make a case more credible or less? And I'd actually also love to know what your take is on the angel hair, because it's such a weird phenomenon that I will definitely talk about in a full episode to Sis. I feel like she'd love that. And yeah, like, I guess, you know, I'd love to hear what you yourself think would happen that day. Do you think it was a mixture of natural phenomenon? Was it our own military technology? I mean, our own as in the world's, someone's technology? Or was it an extraterrestrial craft? Or something else that I haven't talked about? You can let us know on social media. You can get us on Threads and Instagram at the SpookyAF Pod. You can get us in the YouTube comments when this episode goes up, or you can email us at thespookafpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your thoughts on this one. But yeah, with that said, I hope you're having a lovely day whenever it is you listen to this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy, guys.